The sharp click of Ava Sterling's heels echoed across the marble floor of her penthouse as she stepped into the dimly lit nursery. Her hand tightened around the doorframe when she saw him. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood near the crib, sleeves rolled to his elbows, cradling her infant daughter, Nora. In his rough hands, a warm bottle tilted gently toward the baby's lips. Nora's tiny fingers curled around his thumb, her eyes half closed in a peace Ava had never managed to coax from her. Ava's voice cut through the stillness, sharper than she intended. "Who are you?" The man looked up, startled but not flinching. "Lucas Hale," he answered quietly, his gaze dropping back to Nora as if she were the only one who mattered. "From the agency. They said you needed someone tonight." She stepped closer, her instincts screaming to take the baby from his arms, yet her feet stayed rooted. The child's slow breaths, the soft sound of sucking, made it impossible to interrupt. "I said no one touches her," Ava said, but the edge in her voice had thinned. Lucas's jaw tightened. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe. "I wasn't going to stand here and do nothing." Ava hesitated. His voice wasn't defensive, just steady, like someone stating a fact. His eyes held a quiet intensity, protective but shadowed by something older, heavier. "She wouldn't eat for me earlier," Ava admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "That's because you were nervous," Lucas said, almost to Nora instead of her. "They feel that. Sometimes they just need to know they're safe." The word safe lingered in her mind. She could not recall the last time she had felt it herself. But this was her daughter. And this stranger, this single father from a temp agency, was in her home, in her nursery, acting as if he belonged here. "What makes you think you know what she needs?" she challenged. "Because I've been here before," he said, his tone turning raw. "Alone. No one to help. Just a baby who wouldn't stop crying and a heart that would have shattered if I failed him." Ava's breath caught. Lucas shifted Nora slightly, his movements practiced, careful. "I'm not here for money or favors," he added. "I just know what it's like when they need you more than anything in the world." For a moment, Ava forgot her rules, her title. She saw only a man who seemed to understand. The nursery was filled with the rhythm of Nora's breathing. Lucas eased the bottle away, tested the milk's warmth against the back of his hand, and set it on the small table. He draped a soft blanket over the baby and kept rocking her. "You can put her in the crib now," Ava said, her voice steadier but still guarded. "Not yet," Lucas replied. "If I lay her down too soon, she'll startle and cry. She needs to know someone's here holding her through it." Ava studied him. This wasn't the polished charm of people in her circle. It was uncalculated, honest. "You talk like you've done this 1,000 times, she said, crossing her arms. "Once was enough to change me forever," Lucas murmured, brushing a finger along Nora's cheek. The answer carried a weight she didn't press. Nora sighed softly, curling closer against him. Something in the sight twisted inside Ava. None of the high-priced nannies she'd hired had ever gotten this response. "What's your story?" she asked from the doorway. "Nothing worth telling," he said, his eyes still on the baby. "Just a dad trying to make ends meet. Lost my son's mom when he was 3 months old. Learned you can't clock out when you're the only one they've got." Ava's throat tightened. She had grown up never without help, unable to imagine doing it alone. "Why take this job? You could have worked construction, driven a truck, anything." Lucas's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Because when you've been through nights where your baby won't stop crying, and you're not sure you're strong enough to make it till morning, you want to help someone else avoid that feeling, even if it's just for one night. That's kind of noble," she said. "It's just human," Lucas replied. Their eyes met. The air between them felt heavier, charged, not romantic but grounding. She didn't yet realize this night would be the first crack in the walls she'd built. Nora stirred, letting out a small whimper. Lucas adjusted his hold with muscle memory, humming low until she settled again. Ava found herself watching him. "You're unusually good at this," she said casually. "Unusually?" Lucas arched a brow. "Most men I've met panic at the sight of a baby bottle," she said. I didn't have the luxury to panic, Lucas replied. Then his gaze met hers, steady. And maybe you shouldn't underestimate people based on what you expect them to be. Her lips parted, caught off guard. Her phone buzzed on the dresser. 3 missed calls from the company board chair. She turned the screen face down. You're ignoring someone important, Lucas observed. You don't know anything about it, Ava replied too quickly. I know when someone's pretending a problem doesn't exist, he said, calm but sure. No one spoke to her like that, not employees, not family. And yet, she didn't feel insulted. She felt seen. I think you've got me figured out, she asked, stepping closer. I think you've been tough for too long, Lucas said. And maybe you forgot what it's like when someone's willing to carry the weight with you. Her eyes stung, and she turned away. I don't need anyone to carry my weight. You don't need it, Lucas said softly, but sometimes it's okay to want it. Nora yawned, tension in the room fading for a moment. Ava leaned against the wall. When was the last time you slept? Last night, Lucas said, smiling faintly. For 4 hours. 4? Parents take what they can get, he replied. For the first time in months, her guard lowered, just slightly, and though she couldn't explain it yet, his presence felt less like an intrusion and more like relief. But before she could dwell on it, a sharp knock sounded at the penthouse door, breaking the fragile quiet of the nursery. Ava's head snapped toward the hallway, and that was when everything began to shift. The knock came again, harder this time, reverberating through the walls of the penthouse. Ava's brows drew together. No one ever came here unannounced. Stay here, she told Lucas as she stepped into the hallway. But when she reached the front door, he was already there, holding the baby monitor in one hand. His other hand rested lightly against the frame, close enough to move if needed. Ava's pulse quickened. She hesitated, then opened the door just a crack. 2 men stood in the hallway, their suits expensive but worn at the edges. The taller one spoke first, his tone clipped. We need to talk to you. It's about your late husband's debts. Her stomach tightened. You have no right to be here, she said coldly. The second man stepped forward, his voice smoother but with an edge. Either you step outside, or we discuss it right here. His eyes flicked past her toward the nursery hallway. Lucas's posture changed instantly. He was calm, but there was a dangerous stillness in the way he stood. You've got about 3 seconds to take a step back before this conversation's over, he said evenly, his voice low enough not to wake Nora. The first man let out a short scoff. And who exactly are you? Someone who knows how to handle people who don't respect boundaries, Lucas replied without raising his voice. Ava caught the slight shift in their expressions. Their bravado faltered, but they still lingered. The taller man muttered, "This isn't over," before turning down the hallway, the second man following close behind. She shut the door quickly, sliding the lock into place. Her hands trembled despite herself. You didn't have to. Yes, I did, Lucas interrupted, his eyes steady on hers. You were standing there with your guard down, and they were looking past you. That's not about debts. That's about leverage. They've been circling for weeks, Ava admitted reluctantly, hating the way her voice sounded smaller. I thought if I ignored them, they'd go away. Lucas shook his head slightly. People like that don't go away. They wait until they see you alone. She studied him for a moment. You've dealt with people like that before, she said, her words more of an observation than a question. Lucas didn't answer right away. Let's just say I've learned what matters most is keeping the ones who can't fight for themselves safe. Her eyes drifted toward the baby monitor in his hand. The image of Nora asleep, oblivious to the encounter at the door, brought a cold realization. This man wasn't just good with her daughter. He was willing to stand in front of danger without hesitation. The apartment was quiet now, but it was the heavy silence after a storm. Ava sat on the edge of the couch, her elbows resting on her knees, watching as Lucas moved to the nursery. He set Nora gently in her crib, his hand lingering a moment on the railing before he returned. You didn't have to stay after what happened, Ava told him, her voice softer now. Yeah, Lucas said, shrugging off his jacket and draping it over the arm of the couch. But I wasn't about to walk out knowing someone might come back. There was something in the way he said it. Not dramatic, not overbearing, just certain. You talk like someone who's done this before, she said. His eyes flickered, the shadow of an old memory crossing them. I used to wear a badge before my son was born, thought I could save the whole world. Turns out I just needed to save one little life, and that was enough. Her breath caught. Your son, she said quietly. 8 now, Lucas replied with a faint smile. Bright, stubborn. Way too smart for me. He was born early. I was there every second, feeding him with bottles like that one in there, praying he'd make it through the night. Something in Ava shifted. She realized this wasn't just a man who could care for a child. This was someone who had lived the fear, the exhaustion, and the relentless love that came with it. You know, she said slowly, most people I deal with only care about what I can do for them. You're the first in a long time who's done something for me, without asking what's in it for them. Lucas met her gaze steadily. Maybe that's because I'm not here for you. He nodded toward the nursery. I'm here for her. Her throat tightened, and before she could stop herself, she said quietly, Thank you. Lucas gave a single nod, as if that was all he needed, and reached for his jacket. I should go, let you rest. But as he stepped toward the door, Ava stood. Lucas, wait. He turned, his eyes searching hers. I don't know what's going to happen with those men, she said, her voice steadying. But if you're willing, I'd like you to stay. Not just tonight. He studied her for a long moment, measuring the weight of her words, then gave a single quiet nod. All right. And just like that, the balance in the room shifted. The city lights flickered beyond the glass. The night deepened, and Ava Sterling knew this was no longer just about hiring someone to watch her child. It was about letting someone in, and that was something she hadn't done in years. The night settled around them, the city hummed faint through the tall windows. Ava sat back in the armchair while Lucas took the spot on the couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. The air between them was quieter now, but not entirely comfortable. She spoke first, her tone careful. So the agency didn't tell me much about you. Lucas's gaze stayed steady. They wouldn't have much to tell. I take night shifts when my boy's with my sister. Pays the bills. Ava's voice softened just slightly. And the rest of the time? I'm a dad, he said simply. That's the job that matters. Her fingers traced the edge of the armrest, the smooth leather cool under her hand. You said his mother died when he was 3 months old. Lucas nodded once, his eyes fixed on the floor for a moment before returning to hers. Car accident. I was working nights back then. Got the call while I was on shift. When I got to the hospital, they told me he was fine. She wasn't. His voice stayed low, but there was a rough edge to it, the kind that came from telling a story too many times, yet never finding it easier. Ava hesitated, then asked quietly, How did you manage? I didn't have a choice, he said, leaning back slightly. You wake up, you feed them, you hold them when they cry, even when you feel like you're falling apart. You keep going because they don't know you're scared, and they can't afford to find out. Her throat tightened at the blunt honesty. She wasn't used to people stripping things down like that. No pretenses, no polish. You said you used to wear a badge, she said, steering the conversation, but also pulling at the thread of curiosity. 8 years on the force, Lucas replied. It teaches you a lot about people, the best and the worst, and it teaches you that when trouble shows up, you can't afford to freeze. She thought of the way he had stood at the door earlier, the way those 2 men had backed down. That explains tonight, she said quietly. He shrugged. I've seen people like that before. They push, they test boundaries. You give an inch, they take more. I wasn't going to let them get a look at her. His head tilted slightly toward the nursery. Ava's eyes lingered on him. You keep saying you're here for her, not for me. That's right, Lucas said without hesitation. It's unusual, she admitted. Most people I've met see me as the asset, not the baby. That's because most people in your world want something from you, Lucas said, his voice even but not unkind. "I'm not in your world. I'm just here to make sure she's safe." She held his gaze, a strange heaviness settling over her chest. "I grew up surrounded by people, staff, security, assistants. There was always someone there, but I don't think I've ever actually felt safe. Not the way you mean it." Lucas didn't respond right away, but there was a softness in his expression. "Safe isn't about locks and guards," he said finally. "It's about knowing someone's not going to walk away when things get ugly." Ava leaned back, the words sitting heavier than she expected. She couldn't remember the last time someone had said something to her without an agenda behind it. After a long pause, she asked, "Do you miss it, the badge?" Lucas shook his head. "I miss parts of it. The good calls, the ones where you actually help someone. But I don't miss seeing the worst nights of people's lives over and over. I got tired of coming home to my son smelling like blood and smoke. I wanted him to have a dad who wasn't carrying that home every night." She looked at him for a moment, taking in the tired lines around his eyes, the quiet steadiness that didn't feel forced. "Most men I've met," she said, "wouldn't give up something like that unless they were forced to." Lucas gave a faint half smile. "My son didn't ask to be here. He didn't ask to lose his mom. The least I could do was make sure he didn't lose me too." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was weighted, but in a way that made it hard to break. Ava realized she had been leaning slightly forward without noticing. Finally, she spoke again. "You're different from anyone I've hired before." "I'm not here for the job title," Lucas said. "I'm here because I know what it's like to be in over your head and wonder if you're going to make it to morning." Her gaze flicked toward the nursery. "You think that's where I'm at?" He met her eyes without hesitation. "I think you've been carrying everything by yourself for so long, you've forgotten what it's like when someone's willing to carry part of it for you." The words landed hard, and she turned her head slightly so he wouldn't see the way her eyes burned. "I don't need anyone to carry my weight," she said. "You don't need it," Lucas replied, his tone softer now. "But sometimes it's okay to want it." Ava didn't answer. Instead, she stood and crossed to the window, the lights of the city sprawling beneath them. Lucas stayed on the couch, giving her the space she didn't ask for but clearly needed. It wasn't until much later, when she glanced at the clock and realized the hour, that she noticed how the night felt different. The apartment was still, the tension of earlier replaced by something quieter. And for the first time in a long time, Ava didn't feel entirely alone. She didn't know what would happen next. But she knew Lucas wasn't walking away tonight. The next morning came with the pale light of dawn slipping between the tall curtains. Ava had barely slept, though not for the usual reasons. She found herself listening for movement in the nursery, for the sound of Lucas's low hum or the soft shuffle of his footsteps. She walked into the kitchen to find him already there, leaning against the counter with a mug in hand. Nora's baby monitor sat beside him. "You're up early," she said, her voice still rough from sleep. Lucas glanced at her briefly before taking a sip. Force of habit. Years of getting up before the sun don't go away. Ava moved toward the coffee maker, the hum of the machine filling the quiet. "You could have gone home last night," she told him. "Most people would have." "I said I'd stay," he replied simply. There was no arrogance in the way he said it, no implication that she owed him anything. Just a fact, stated plainly. Ava hesitated, watching him over the rim of her cup. "About that, I meant what I said. I'd like you to stay, not just for tonight or tomorrow, but longer." Lucas set his mug down slowly. "You're talking about more than a few shifts." "Yes," she said, steadying her voice. "You've seen what's been going on. Those men, what they said about my husband's debts, it's not going to disappear, and I can't." She stopped herself, but the words had already pressed close to the surface. "I can't do this alone anymore? Not the way I have been." Lucas studied her quietly for a moment. "It's not a small thing you're asking." "I know," Ava said, "but you've proven in less than a day that you can keep her safe. And that matters more than anything else." His gaze softened, but he didn't rush to answer. "If I do this, I need to be clear. My son comes first. He stays with my sister during my shifts, but there will be times I need to be with him. That's fine, she replied quickly, almost too quickly as if afraid he might back out. Whatever you need, we can work around it. He nodded once, still considering. And I'm not here to get tangled in your business affairs. My job would be making sure she's safe, that's it. Ava's lips curved in a faint, almost reluctant smile. I think that's exactly what I need. Before Lucas could respond, a faint sound came from the monitor, Nora's soft cry, not yet urgent. He picked it up and started toward the nursery without another word. Ava followed a few steps behind, watching as he lifted the baby with practiced ease. You're good with her, Ava said quietly from the doorway. Lucas didn't look up. I've had practice. She's calmer with you than with anyone else, she added, almost as if the admission cost her something. That's not magic, he said while settling Nora against his shoulder. It's time. Patience. They feel when you're not rushing them. Ava leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. You make it sound simple. It's not, Lucas said, glancing her way for the first time, but nothing worth doing ever is. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional soft sound from Nora. Outside the nursery window, the city was waking up, but in here it felt like a separate world. Finally, Ava broke the silence. So, will you stay? Lucas looked down at Nora, then back at Ava. I'll stay, he said. The words landed with a weight she felt in her chest. Later that afternoon, while Lucas tended to Nora, Ava stepped into her office to check her phone. There were more missed calls from the same number as the night before, along with several unread messages. She didn't open them. From the nursery, she heard Lucas speaking softly to the baby. You don't have to worry, he was saying. We'll figure it out. She paused in the hallway, unseen, the sound of his voice pulling her back toward the doorway. He wasn't talking to her, but the words still reached her. When he noticed her there, he didn't look embarrassed. She's got a good grip, he said, nodding toward Nora's hand wrapped tightly around his finger. Ava stepped inside. She doesn't let go easily. Lucas met her eyes. Neither do I. The simplicity of it left her without a quick response. Instead, she reached down to adjust the blanket over Nora, her fingers brushing his briefly. The air between them shifted again, not in a way that called for words, but in a way that made her certain of one thing. Having him here felt less like a risk and more like an anchor. And for the first time in years, Ava Sterling was willing to hold on to that. By the third night, the rhythm of their days had already shifted. Lucas moved through the apartment as if he had always known its spaces, not intruding but fitting into them. Ava found herself listening for his footsteps, the quiet way he moved from room to room, and the steady presence that seemed to hold the air together. That evening, the city outside was restless. The wind pushed against the glass, carrying the low hum of traffic. Ava was on the couch, her laptop open but untouched, while Lucas sat on the floor with Nora in his lap, reading from a board book in a calm, steady tone. You've got her full attention, Ava said from across the room, her voice carrying a trace of admiration she hadn't meant to reveal. Lucas didn't look up from the book. Stories are better when someone's willing to sit still for them, he said. She doesn't sit still for me, Ava admitted. That's not about you, Lucas replied, glancing her way now. It's about trust. It takes time. She'll get there. Ava closed the laptop, setting it aside. And what about me? He raised a brow slightly. What about you? Do you think I'll get there? She asked. Lucas's answer came without hesitation. I think you want to. That's enough to start. The sound of his voice, low and certain, stayed with her long after the conversation drifted away. Later that night, while Lucas was in the nursery putting Nora to sleep, Ava heard a faint noise from the hallway outside her door. It was too deliberate to be the wind, too slow to be the building's usual creaks. She moved toward the sound just as Lucas appeared in the living room, his expression already alert. You heard that too, Ava said, her voice low. He nodded once, stepping closer to the door without rushing. Stay back, he told her quietly. The knock came, soft but firm. Lucas positioned himself between Ava and the entryway, his shoulders squared, his voice steady as he called through the door, "This isn't the time or the place. Leave." A pause followed, then the faint sound of footsteps retreating down the hallway. Lucas didn't open the door until the silence outside stretched long enough to be sure. "That's twice now," Ava said, when he turned back to her. "They're testing you," Lucas replied, "looking for the moment you're alone or rattled." Ava crossed her arms. "They're not going to stop, are they?" "Not until they get what they think they're owed," he said, "but they won't get it from you, not if you keep your head clear and your doors locked." She watched him for a moment, noticing the way he stayed near the door until he was satisfied it was secure. "You're making this sound like a war," she said quietly. "It's not a war," Lucas answered. "It's just about keeping the people who can't fight for themselves out of reach." The truth of it pressed down on her. She had spent her life surrounded by money, power, and people trained to protect her, but none of them had stood in front of her door like this man had, twice now, without asking for anything in return. The hours passed without further disturbance. When Lucas finally returned to the couch, Ava was still awake. "You could sleep," he said, glancing toward her. "So could you," she replied. He smiled faintly. "Parents take what they can get." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the earlier tension slowly giving way. Ava leaned back, her voice quieter now. "I never asked. What made you decide to take this job specifically? It's not exactly a safe choice." Lucas thought for a moment before answering. "Because I've been where you are. Different details, same feeling. When my son was a baby, there were nights I didn't think I'd make it to morning. I don't want anyone else to feel that way if I can help it." "That's not just a job," Ava said. "No," Lucas agreed, "it's not." She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "You've been here 3 days, and the apartment feels different, quieter. Not just because of Nora, because of you." Lucas didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was steady. "That's what safe feels like." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Outside, the city kept its restless pace, but inside the penthouse, the air was still. Ava realized then that his presence wasn't just about keeping her daughter safe from the men at the door. It was about keeping her steady, too, and she hadn't known until now how much she needed that. By the time the lights in the city had begun to dim and the first hint of dawn touched the glass, Ava finally felt her eyes grow heavy. She didn't remember falling asleep, only the quiet sound of Lucas's voice somewhere nearby, low and certain, telling her, "It's okay. I've got this." And for the first time in years, she believed it.